They called her the dust of the earth, a girl with no shoes, no surname, and no hope. But the day she wiped tears with the corner of her torn dress in front of his car, the richest man in South Africa stopped his world. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his worth. Yet that single tear changed everything. From the glass towers of Sandton to the forgotten corners of Limpopo, their love became a storm no amount of money could silence. Because when poverty meets power, one must bow. This is the story of how a man who owned everything fell for the one woman who owned nothing, yet gave him everything his money could never buy: peace. The morning after, Thabo Masiko sat by his wide glass window, staring at the Johannesburg skyline. It was a city of gold, endless towers, silent cars, and people who wore masks of happiness. He had built this empire, yet something in him felt terribly hollow. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Naledi. Her name echoed softly in his thoughts, pure, unpolished, and painfully real. Her eyes had carried something no business deal ever gave him: peace. He tried to work that morning, but every document blurred into dust. He canceled his meetings. His personal assistant, Boydamelo, looked confused. "Sir, you have a board call with Dubai in 20 minutes. "Cancel it," Thabo said. "Cancel? Dubai, sir," she repeated wide-eyed. "Yes," he said quietly, adjusting his cufflinks. "I'm going back to Limpopo." Boydamelo didn't understand, but she didn't question him. No one ever did. The journey was long, 6 hours through open fields and winding roads. But Thabo didn't mind. Every kilometer drew him closer to that moment, the look in Naledi's eyes when she wiped her tears. He didn't know why he was going back. All he knew was that something inside him needed to see her again. As he entered Giamalipo, the same children who had stared at his car before ran behind it shouting, "Morena? Morena!" "Chief!" The same goats scattered again. The same wind rose with dust. Naledi was there, sitting beneath the same tree, fanning her fire as smoke curled into the morning air. When she saw the black Rolls-Royce approach, her heart skipped. She blinked twice, thinking it was a dream. But then he stepped out. He was dressed simply this time: jeans, a plain white shirt, and dark sunglasses. Yet, even simplicity looked royal on him. Naledi stood slowly, clutching her basket. "You came back," she whispered. He smiled. "You didn't think I would." She shook her head, shyly looking down. "People like you don't come back to places like this twice." He took a step closer. "Maybe people like me should." The villagers watched from a distance, pretending to fetch water, but really whispering and pointing. Gossip in Giamalipo spread faster than the wind. Thabo bought every roasted malai Naledi had again, and this time he sat on a small stone beside her, ignoring the dust on his expensive shoes. The rich man of Sandton sat beside a barefoot girl under a tree in Limpopo, and for the first time in years, he felt alive. They talked, awkwardly at first. "So, what do you do in Johannesburg?" she asked. "I build things," he replied. "What kind of things?" He smiled faintly. "Tall ones. Shiny ones. The kind people take pictures in front of." Naledi laughed softly. "You mean buildings?" "Yes," he said. "Buildings that reach the clouds." She nodded, still not realizing who he truly was. That must be nice. To touch the clouds. He looked at her hands, rough, scarred, honest. "Sometimes the clouds are cold," he said. "And lonely." Naledi tilted her head. "Then maybe you're flying too high." That sentence hit him harder than she knew. After a while, Thabo asked about her mother. Naledi's face softened. "She's better today. But the medicine is expensive. I try to manage with what I have." He hesitated, then spoke gently. "Can I help?" Naledi frowned. "No, sir. You've already done enough." Her pride touched him, a kind of quiet strength money could never buy. He realized she wasn't impressed by wealth. She was shaped by survival. Before he left, he gave her a small phone. Simple, no internet, just calls. "In case you ever need anything," he said. Naledi looked at it as if it were made of gold. "I don't know your number," she whispered. He took the phone gently and typed it in. "Now you do." When he left again, her heart felt heavy. She didn't understand why, or what kind of storm his presence was about to bring into her life. Back in Johannesburg, Thabo couldn't concentrate. He sat through board meetings like a ghost. Every time someone spoke of profit, he thought of her laughter by the roadside. Every time someone mentioned expansion, he saw her carrying her mother's water pot. That night, he opened his old piano, the one he hadn't touched since his father's funeral, and played a soft, broken melody. He named it Naledi's Song. Boidamello found him there the next morning, still lost in thought. "Sir," she said quietly, "your mother used to say, when a Masiko man stops chasing money and starts chasing peace, something sacred is happening." Tabo looked up, surprised. "You knew my mother?" Boidamello smiled faintly. "We all did, sir. She was a woman who believed love could humble kings." Tabo stood, his heart tightening. Maybe she was right. Weeks passed. Every Friday, Tabo disappeared from Johannesburg without explanation. The media thought he was negotiating new land deals in rural areas. But in truth, he was sitting under the same tree, beside the same girl who sold roasted mealies, and he was learning life all over again. Naledi began to open up. She told him about her dreams, how she wanted to learn nursing, how she sometimes wrote poems in her mother's old Bible margins. He listened like every word was gold. And slowly, quietly, the lines between their worlds began to blur. One evening, as the sun melted into orange and gold, Tabo watched her laughing with the village children. Something inside him broke, not in pain, but in awe. He walked toward her. "Naledi," he said softly. She turned, her smile fading slightly at the intensity in his eyes. "There's something I must tell you," he said. "Who I really am." She looked at him curiously. "You're not just a man who builds tall buildings, are you?" He exhaled. "No, I'm Tabo Masiko." The name hung in the air like thunder. Even in her small village, that name was known, the billionaire whose face was on TV, the man everyone said could buy a country if he wished. Naledi took a step back. You're that Tabo Masiko." He nodded slowly. Her eyes filled with disbelief and something deeper, fear. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I wanted to be seen," he said softly. "Not as a billionaire. As a man." She shook her head, backing away. "You don't belong here, Tabo. And I don't belong in your world." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Naledi, please." Her tears fell before his could. "You don't understand. Men like you don't stay. You save people like me for a day, not a lifetime." And with that, she ran into the fading light, leaving the richest man in South Africa standing alone in the dust, finally realizing that love, too, can humble kings. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Naledi didn't go to the roadside anymore. She stayed home, caring for her mother, pretending everything was normal. But her heart, her stubborn, wounded heart, kept replaying that moment, the look in Tabo's eyes when he said, "I wanted to be seen." She wanted to forget him. She wanted to erase the sound of his voice, the softness in his tone, the strange comfort of his presence. But the truth was cruel. Some people walk into your life quietly, and even when they leave, their footsteps keep echoing in your soul. Meanwhile, in Johannesburg, Tabo was restless. He had tasted sincerity for the first time, and now every glass of wine, every boardroom applause, every compliment from high society women felt meaningless. He canceled another conference trip to London and drove alone back to Limpopo. His guards tried to follow, but he dismissed them at the outskirts of the city. "If I can't face her without bodyguards," he muttered, "then I don't deserve her." He arrived at Giamalipo after sunset. The air was cool, scented with wood smoke and silence. The same children who once ran after his car were asleep. The village, under the moonlight, looked softer, humble, yet alive. He parked near Naledi's small hut, the headlights dimmed. When he stepped out, the village dogs barked, then quieted as if they too sensed the gravity of his visit. Naledi's mother, MMA Kabo, was sitting by a small fire when she saw him. Her eyes widened. She struggled to stand, her weak knees trembling. "Sir, are you lost?" Tabo shook his head gently. "No, Mama. I came to see Naledi." She looked at him closely, the way only mothers can, beyond his clothes, beyond his face, into his intentions. "At this hour?" "I had to," he said softly. "I hurt her with the truth." MMA Kabo sighed deeply, then motioned for him to sit by the fire. "She's inside, but she doesn't want to talk. You must understand, sir, poor girls learn early that some dreams are dangerous." Tabo nodded. "I understand." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire dance. He asked about her health, and she told him about her struggles, medicine too expensive, days too long. Without saying a word, Tabo slipped an envelope beside her stool. "For your medicine," he murmured. She didn't open it. She only looked at him, and her old eyes softened. "Money is not what she needs tonight, Tabo. It's faith." Those words pierced deeper than any insult. When Naledi finally stepped out, Her doke was loose, her eyes red from crying. She froze at the sight of him sitting beside her mother. The firelight flickered across his face, painting his sadness in gold and shadow. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice small. He stood slowly. "I came to prove you wrong." "About what?" "That men like me don't stay." Nality shook her head. "You don't belong here, Tabo. This place is dust, and you're made of gold." He stepped closer. "Then let me be gold in your dust." She looked away, biting her lip to stop the tears. "Why me? You could have any woman, models, actresses, businesswomen, women who wear perfume, not would smoke." "Because they never looked at me the way you did," he said. "You saw a man, not a fortune." Her chest rose and fell. The truth in his words shook her. "Where will you sleep?" she whispered. "Here," he said. Her eyes widened. "Here? There's no hotel in Giamalipo." "Good," he said with a small smile. "Then maybe I'll finally sleep in peace." By midnight, the entire village knew. "Tabo Masiko is sleeping in Nality's hut," they whispered. Old women peeked from windows, men whispered under trees, children giggled. Inside the small mud house, Tabo lay on a woven mat beside the door, while Nality and her mother shared their bed. He had refused a mattress. "This is enough," he'd said, humbled. He listened to the night's sounds, the crickets, the wind, the faint cough of MMA Cabo, and felt something break inside him. For years, he had paid for silence in luxury suites, yet none of them had sounded this peaceful. Nality couldn't sleep either. She kept turning on the bed, her heart beating fast. "Are you awake?" Tabo whispered from the floor. "Yes." He smiled faintly in the dark. "It's strange, isn't it?" "What is?" "How I feel richer here than anywhere else." She turned toward him, her face barely visible in the moonlight. "Maybe wealth isn't about what you have," she said softly, "but who you share it with." For a long moment, they just stared at each other. No distance, no title, just two souls caught between two worlds. The next morning, when Tabo stepped out of the hut, half the village was waiting. Old Kosi Ramela, the village head, walked up to him. "Masiko," he said sternly, "you have disturbed our peace. You are a man of power. She is a child of dust. What are your intentions?" Tabo bowed his head respectfully. "I came here because she gave me peace when the world could not. I don't want to take her away. I want to understand her world." The old man studied him, eyes narrowing. "Your kind doesn't understand poverty. You visit it like a tourist." Tabo met his gaze firmly. "Then let me stay long enough to learn." The villagers murmured among themselves. No rich man had ever spoken like that. Nality stood behind him, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and fear. He stayed 3 days in the village. He fetched water from the river. He helped repair a leaking roof. He shared mealies with children who had never seen a billionaire smile. And every night, he sat under the same tree where they first met, listening to Nality's soft voice tell stories about hope. On the third night, he said quietly, "I've decided something." She turned to him. "What?" "I'm building a clinic here, for your mother, for everyone." Her eyes widened, tears rising again. "Why would you do that?" He looked at her tenderly. "Because when I met you, Nality, I realized something no boardroom ever taught me. When you heal others, you heal yourself." She covered her mouth, sobbing softly. He took her hand, gently, reverently, and said, "Let me be part of your world, even if it humbles mine." Nality didn't answer. She couldn't. She only leaned her head on his shoulder, letting the tears fall freely for the first time. And under the Limpopo stars, the richest man in South Africa finally felt poor enough to be filled with love. The morning sun was soft over Giamalipo, painting the mud huts in gold. Children ran barefoot, laughter echoing through the valley. For a brief time, life felt lighter, as if the village itself was learning to smile again. Since Tabo's arrival, everything had changed. He had built a borehole for clean water. He bought blankets for the elders. He hired local builders to start working on the clinic. And every evening, he sat under the same tree beside Nality, listening to her hum that old lullaby. To the villagers, he was no longer the billionaire who didn't belong. He was the rich man who remembered the poor. But the city was watching. It began with a photograph. A journalist from Johannesburg, Lerato Kumalo, had been tipped off by one of Tabo's drivers. A single picture, Tabo, dressed in plain clothes, carrying a bucket of water beside a barefoot girl, went viral within hours. "Billionaire spotted living with village girl, who is she?" South Africa's richest man abandons boardroom for bush life. Love or scandal? The mystery woman of Giamalipo. Every news outlet picked it up. Twitter burned with opinions. Some called it romantic. Others called it reckless. In his glass office in Santon, Tabo's business partner Richard Lamini slammed the newspaper on the table. Have you lost your mind, Tabo? You're trending for carrying firewood. Tabo didn't flinch. Maybe it's time people saw that life isn't just made of glass towers and profit margins. Richard glared at him. And what about your investors? The international deal with Zurich Bank? You think they'll trust a man who's sleeping in a mud hut with a village girl? Tabo's voice was calm but firm. If love makes me less of a businessman, then maybe I was never human to begin with. Meanwhile, in Giamalipo, Naledi's peace shattered overnight. Reporters swarmed the village, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust toward her face. Are you dating Mr. Masiko? Did he promise you money? Do you plan to marry him? Naledi trembled as she tried to walk past them, clutching her mother's medicine. The villagers looked on with fear and fascination. Some smiled, others whispered harshly. Now, she thinks she's better than us, one woman muttered. Watch, he'll leave her soon, another added. Naledi ran to the riverside, her heart pounding. The same river where they first spoke now felt like stranger. Tabo arrived that afternoon to find her crying. She didn't even look up when his car stopped. You shouldn't have come, she said softly. He stepped closer. Naledi. Look what you've done, she interrupted, her voice breaking. They followed you here. They took pictures. They called me names. My mother hasn't slept since morning. They say I bewitched you. Tabo's chest tightened. I'm sorry. I didn't tell anyone. I swear. I know you didn't, she whispered. But your world found me anyway. He reached out, but she stepped back. You said you wanted to understand my world, Tabo. Now you've brought yours to destroy it. Those words struck deeper than she knew. That evening, Tabo held a village meeting. He stood before the people, tall and composed, his voice heavy with sincerity. My friends, he began, I never came here for headlines. I came because this place, and one woman, reminded me what it means to be alive. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Naledi stood at the back, her heart in pieces. I know I've caused trouble, he continued, and if my presence brings shame, I'll leave. But before I go, I'll finish what I started, the clinic, the borehole, the school. This village deserves that. Old Kosi Ramela nodded slowly. You have a good heart, Tabo. But love between clouds and dust is never easy. Tabo smiled faintly. Then let me get dirty. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat under the same tree where they first met, staring into the darkness. In the distance, he heard drums, the village women singing under the moon. Their voices carried pain and beauty, life and sorrow. Then he saw her, Naledi, walking toward him, her eyes glistening. I don't hate you, she whispered. I'm just scared. Of what? Of being your weakness. He rose slowly. You're my strength, Naledi. You reminded me who I was before the money. She sighed deeply. The world won't understand us. They'll twist everything. Then let them, he said. Let them talk. Let them write their stories. I'll write ours. She shook her head, tears rolling down. You can survive scandal, Tabo. I can't. My mother can't. He took her hands gently. Then tell me what to do. Leave, she said, her voice trembling. Just for a while. Let things cool down. His heart broke at the word leave. I'll come back, he promised. You have my word. The next morning, the Rolls-Royce drove out of Giamalipo, its tires crushing the same dust where they had first met. Naledi watched from afar, her heart both heavy and proud. The reporters soon left. The village returned to quiet. But inside her, something was missing, a silence that felt too deep. She sat by the river again, alone, humming that same lullaby. But this time, every note carried a question. Would he really come back? In Johannesburg, Tabo faced chaos. Board members threatened resignation. Sponsors withdrew deals. Richard warned him, you're losing billions for a girl who sells corn. Tabo's reply was quiet but final. Then let me lose the world if I can keep what made me human. He spent nights staring at the photograph, the one of him carrying the water bucket, and realized it was the only picture in his entire house that made him smile. The world saw shame. He saw meaning. Months passed. The clinic in Giamalipo was completed, but Naledi never attended the opening. She couldn't bear the crowd. She stayed home, caring for her mother, clutching the small phone he'd given her. Every night, she would type a message, "Are you okay?" Then delete it. Until one night, the phone rang. Her heart jumped. She answered. Nality. She froze. That voice, calm, deep, familiar. Tabo. "I'm coming home," he said softly. "Not to build. Not to buy. Just to stay." Her eyes filled instantly. "Then hurry," she whispered, voice trembling. "Because I stopped watching the sunrise when you left." The sun did not rise gently that morning. It crawled, as though ashamed to shine on hearts that were breaking in silence. In the small village of Giamocapane, Nandi woke up with swollen eyes and a prayer stuck in her throat. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Her mind replayed every word Cabello had spoken the night before, his promise to return, his trembling voice as he whispered, "You've reminded me what it means to be human." She could still feel his fingers, the richest fingers in South Africa, brushing the edge of her cracked palm, as if it was gold dust. She could still hear the villagers gossiping as his Range Rover drove away, raising a small storm of dust and disbelief. They said she was foolish. They said she was chasing shadows. But deep inside, Nandi believed something rare had just begun, something purer than wealth, deeper than class. In Sandton, Cabello sat by his penthouse window, staring at the rain that began to fall over Johannesburg. His reflection looked strange, the eyes of a man who had everything but peace. The rain was loud, yet not louder than his thoughts. He remembered Nandi's small voice when she said, "Sometimes the poorest people give the richest love." It broke something in him. He had board meetings, charity dinners, and TV interviews lined up, all meaningless now. His assistant, Lorado, noticed how distant he had become. His phone, which once never stopped ringing, now lay silent beside him. He tried to drown her memory in luxury, but her laughter found him in the quietest corners of his mansion. He had fallen, deeply helplessly. Days turned into weeks. The newspapers called him the disappearing billionaire. They didn't know he was driving through villages, disguised in plain shirts, searching for the girl who didn't know how to ask for anything. But one afternoon, when he finally reached Giamocapane again, she was gone. The villagers said she had left for Johannesburg, trying to find work as a housekeeper. Her grandmother had fallen sick, and Nandi had gone in search of a way to buy medicine. Cabello's heart broke in quiet panic. He searched the hospitals, the markets, the taxi ranks, everywhere. But in a city of millions, how do you find one soul whose only mark was kindness? He finally stopped by the roadside, stepped out of his car, and let the rain fall on him, the same way it once fell on her. And that was when he whispered, almost to himself, "Nandi, wherever you are, I'll find you, even if I must lose everything." Far away, under a leaking roof in Johannesburg, Nandi held her grandmother's frail hands. She had spent all day cleaning offices, her fingers blistered from bleach and soap. She didn't know that the man whose floor she had once swept in her village now walked the same city streets, calling her name in silence. As the night deepened, thunder rolled, a loud, aching sound that felt like two hearts trying to reach each other through distance and pain. Nandi looked out the window and whispered into the darkness, "If it's meant to be, God, let the rain touch him too." And somewhere in Sandton, Cabello stood by the glass wall of his mansion, tears mixing with raindrops, whispering the same prayer. When love crosses the line between gold and dust, hearts pay the price. He had the world at his feet, yet the one person he needed most had already walked away. Will Cabello find Nandi before fate breaks them apart forever? Or will his wealth become the very thing that buries their love? If you want to know what happens when he finally finds her, when the truth of who he is shatters everything she believes in, then tell us in the comments. We want part 2. Because sometimes love is not finished. It's just waiting for the next chapter. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because part 2 will break your heart and heal it again.